They're coming to get you, Barbara.
When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth.
Hi guys, once again, this is Mr. Bangers, aka Zach here, over here, my buddy, my pal, your friend and mine.
Mr. Mash, aka JD.
Can you believe that this is the 50th episode of the show?
No.
That is halfway to 100.
God.
Did you seriously think when we started this that we would go this long?
No.
Thought we would make it to like 5 and then quit.
Yeah. We never really commit to anything this long.
To commemorate something of a milestone for us, and also to honor the Halloween season, which I officially declared upon us now.
I started a week ago.
In order to honor both of these occasions, time we get to a topic we probably should have gotten to a long time ago. Today we're talking about zombie movies.
I've been trying to get you to do this for 2 years now. You just wouldn't do it.
Yeah, that's actually the reverse of what the truth is. We're not just doing any zombie movies. We are doing the zombie films of director George A. Romero.
We're also doing some of the
related series.
Yes.
Some of the spin-offs and remakes. And that leaves us with a hefty list. Let's jump right in to the first of what we consider the modern zombie movie.
Night of the Living Dead.
Welcome to a night of total terror. Night of the living dead. The dead who live on living flesh. The dead whose haunted souls hunt the living. A night with the dead who cannot die. A night of total terror. Night of the living dead.
Real hardcore horror nerds like myself say that the modern age of horror started in 1960 with Psycho. But other people make the case that the first really modern horror movie was this one. Dragged the genre kicking and screaming into the modern age. Horror films were gore movies from this point on.
I agree with you. I think Psycho. You could make an argument for this one, and that's certainly true.
The genre continued to evolve throughout the 60s, and I think this was the turning point. After this, there was no going back to what horror was before.
I liked the film. I have some problems with it, but I like it.
Well, we will discuss those. Now, this film really created what we think of as zombies. Before this movie,
they were the voodoo zombies.
They were undead servants. They didn't eat people. They didn't moan. They didn't get killed by destroying the brain. These are all things that Romero invented. It is notable that the script never uses the word zombie. They are referred to as ghouls. The director himself has been honest about to rip the premise off of I Am Legend, which is, of course, a book about vampires. What is this movie about?
There's a satellite that comes from Venus, and NASA blows it up to prevent the radiation from getting to Earth. But surprise, it makes it to Earth anyway. The recently deceased to come back to life and walk the Earth and devour human flesh.
Focus specifically on one group of people.
Barbara,
Ben, the Coopers, 2 teens. Barbara and her brother Johnny drive up to Pennsylvania countryside every year to lay a wreath on their father's grave. In the graveyard, they see a strange man emerge.
Look! There's one of them now!
Johnny gets killed, Barbara flees
Okay, hold on. Brings us to my first problem with the film. If the zombie is fighting with Johnny, smashes his head on the tombstone, why doesn't he just stop there and eat Johnny? Barbara's going to run regardless.
The only real answer to that question, the script needs it to be that way. Something needs to chase her to get her to go. The zombie rules have not been developed yet. A first-time viewer who knows nothing about zombie films, they don't know yet that the ghouls are flesh eaters.
But they even do that in the remake.
That's a nitpick, dude.
That is not a nitpick. That is an honest, legit
You gotta get Barbara to the farmhouse, where she's...
But she's going to run anyway.
Oh my god.
Anyhow, go on. Since I'm ruining your podcast.
You're not ruining the podcast. This is what people listen for. The movie is about the people in the farmhouse. Once they get to the house, that's where the story really begins. This is a siege picture about them nailing up the board, trying to keep the dead out. One of the things that I really appreciate about Romero's films, especially compared to other zombie movies, his films are never just about the zombies. They're not just gore fest. You could read a lot into each one of his films, and he invites it. People have made the case that this first film, Night of the Living Dead, is really about the end of the 60s. It's about a new culture arising and literally devouring the old culture. The rules of life and death as we know it have been completely rewritten. You mentioned the news broadcast. The news broadcaster said, there's no time for ceremonies. Have to destroy the bodies as soon as somebody dies. Barbara and Johnny first get to the graveyard. You hear Johnny say, it's a very dismissive comment about religion. The old rules don't matter anymore. Things have changed irrevocably.
There's a really big undertone with the whole church thing. You can tell that Barbara is the really religious one. Johnny's more agnostic.
And then he gets his head smashed.
And then he gets his head smashed. It's a statement. But Barbara ends up getting eaten later on, too.
Barbara is not an active character in this film.
Well, that actually doesn't bother me. What does bother me is misogyny and the racism.
There's no misogyny in this movie.
What about the part where she's going nutso and she smacks Ben? If he would have just smacked her to slap her out of it, that would have been different. But he balls up a fist and knocks that bitch on her ass.
And she's unconscious for a large portion of the film.
Yes, undertones of misogyny.
It's not misogynistic.
And
Ben's under a lot of stress right now, okay?
Cooper talking down on Ben and undermining all of his decisions, undertones of racism.
Okay, JD, I think you are confusing a film being racist with a film that criticizes racism. This movie is very actively criticizing...
I didn't say that it wasn't criticizing.
George and other people who've worked on this film have said over and over again that Dwayne Jones, the actor who plays Ben, was not chosen for his skin color. He was chosen because he was the best actor for the part. Really up to you, the viewer, to...
Yeah, I saw that interview too, Zach.
Do you buy that?
Not really.
You have to keep in mind when this movie was made. This was 1968. This was right in the middle of the race issue.
I don't buy that it's really criticizing racism so much.
I think it is all about it.
The racism issues that I have isn't necessarily what they're doing to criticize racism, what might not have been viewed as unethical at the time.
The movie's not racist. You can't say it's racist.
I don't think it's blatantly racist.
Because Ben is a very strong character. He's really the only guy in this movie that has his head on straight.
Hold on. The hunting party. Do you see one black person in the hunting party?
No, and that's the point, JD. When the zombie crisis happens, what's society's response? They form basically these lynch mobs of redneck good old boys who's going out shooting zombies because it's fun. The movie is deliberately criticizing that. And when they see Ben, what do?
They shoot him in the head.
They shoot him in the head because he's black. These characters see a black man as beneath them. They're putting him on the same level as the zombies. And this film is deliberately criticizing that mind.
Whatever. We'll just have to agree to disagree. Next.
What else was going on in the world right now when this film was made in 1968? The Vietnam War.
I know it's a war. Give me a minute here.
If it's not the first modern horror movie, it's the first post-Vietnam horror film. Then Romero has said as much. One of the things they were trying to invoke, newsreel starkness. This is not a gothic horror film. The horror is not happening somewhere far away. This is happening in our backyard. Almost literally in our backyard.
Well, yeah.
This brings the horror home.
I think that's why, for the longest time, I couldn't sit through the movies. These movies are terrifying, but for that reason.
You can read into this film what was going on in society at the time. Some of it is more intentional than others. George Romero's main thesis, and it's in all of his zombie movies, mankind can never succeed because we're all too busy bickering about stupid, meaningless shit. We cannot communicate properly, and that is our downfall.
I can agree with that.
And I think that is primarily represented in this film, the conflict between Ben and Mr. Cooper.
Definitely.
Big disagreement. Cooper says the basement is the safest place. Ben says up here is the safest place. You're the boss down here, I'm the boss up here. And eventually they come to blows, and Ben shoots Mr. Cooper before he even becomes a zombie. And the ultimate irony is that Cooper was right. The basement is the safest place. When the zombies get into the house, Ben boards up in the basement and survives the night.
There's no racist undertones whatsoever. The white guy's always right.
I'm
just saying.
I don't think that's intentional, JD. Ben and Cooper are arguing, and it's not even about important shit. They're arguing about who gets the TV, who gets the radio. First-time viewer, you watch this movie, and there is a scene where the camera points out that there's a door into a basement that we previously didn't notice. It's a shock when they come up out of the basement. When I first saw this movie many, many years ago, I didn't know what the fuck was going on. You said it's terrifying. This is a frightening film.
Oh, yeah. It scared me to the point that it used to make fun of me that I couldn't watch it all the way through.
Yeah, you have not seen this movie in its entirety until very recently.
It's one of those movies.
It's not so much the gore.
This movie hadn't really defined the Romero zombie as the slow, lumbering zombie yet.
They use tools a lot. The graveyard zombie smashes the car window with a rock, and later you see one banging on the door with part of the chair that Ben burned earlier.
Some of the zombies kind of run in this.
I don't know if they really run.
It's not a slow meander.
Yeah, you are right that the rules are still being defined at this point.
They're very intelligent.
When Karen, the little girl, stabs her mom to death with a trowel.
That is one of the problems that I have with the film, but it's a nitpick. I overlook it. I know that the rules are still being defined. He goes and unhooks the telephone wire and shit like that.
I don't think the zombie was intentionally unhooking the telephone wire.
He did stumble into that.
And the real reason this movie is scary, it has this really bleak tone. There's no happy ending here. Nobody makes it out of this one alive.
What else is terrifying about it? That it's black and white.
The black and white photography has a lot to do with it. There's this very stark quality to the film. It feels like a newsreel.
You can't see the redness of the blood, and you can still see that they're sitting there devouring and ripping apart people.
Let's talk about the gore then. Zombies are getting holes blown in them, and they're getting their head shot. But really, it's when the truck blows up. That aftermath where the zombies are feasting on the guts. It still turns your stomach a bit.
Yeah.
The zombies are fighting over the intestines.
You're seeing people bite and rip.
Maybe the most famous scene in this movie is when Karen Cooper, the little girl, stabs her mom to death. It's almost in slow motion. Her screams are distorted. Blood is splattering on the wall. When the zombies get in. And at that point, there's no hope now. The Duke boys aren't getting out of this bucket of syrup.
When Barbara gets killed at the end, totally threw me for a loop. Just watched the movie this morning for the first time all the way through, I'll admit it. When she got taken at the end by the horde of zombies.
You didn't see that one coming.
Didn't see that coming. I had somehow evaded the spoiler alert of a 60-year-old movie.
50-year-old movie, yeah. As good as this film is, and I really, really like this movie a lot. The scenes show a bit. This was a very low-budget film. The editing, especially, can be somewhat sudden. And then the music. It's all stock music from 50s serials and shit. It can be distracting sometimes. Mm-hmm. Night of the Living Dead, true classic in my opinion. And notably in the public domain. George didn't make a cent off of this one.
In 1968, George Romero brought us Night of the Living Dead. It became the classic horror film of its time. Now, George Romero brings us the most intensely shocking motion picture experience for all times.
It gets up and kills. The people it kills get up and kill.
Imagine, if you will, that something has gone terribly wrong. Accept the fact that there's no escaping the horrible consequences. George Romero brings back the dead. Night of the Living Dead has ended. Dawn of the Dead is here.
After Night was such a huge film and immediately influential, but throughout the 70s, George didn't make another zombie movie. He went off and made other weird stuff like Martin. His investors were telling him, can we get a sequel to Night of the Living Dead? That's still your biggest hit. And he just wasn't sure. The inspiration came when he visited a shopping mall. And he was on the top floor of the mall and looking down at all the people shambling through the mall. And that was the eureka moment. And thus was born the belated 10-year later sequel to Night of the Living Dead. What comes after the night?
The Dawn.
Dawn of the Dead from 1978. As big as a hit as Night was, I think Dawn was an even bigger hit, especially in Europe, where this film spawned the Italian zombie movie, which we'll talk about more later. First movie created the zombie movie. This one changed the rules of the zombie movie. Night showed the beginning of the zombie apocalypse. This film takes place an undetermined amount of time later. Now society is on the brink of total collapse. Mm-hmm. The film begins, they're in a newsroom with Francine and her boyfriend, a helicopter pilot. The news station is in chaos, and notably, I think a very poignant moment. Rescue Center scrolling beneath the interviews. These aren't accurate anymore. We need to pull these off the air. And the guy who runs the news station comes down and says, don't pull the rescue station names. People will stop watching. The zombie apocalypse is happening, and he's still worried about ratings. Meanwhile, chaos in the city. The police are trying to break into this apartment complex where people are keeping their dead relatives. You want to talk about race in this movie. I think it is notable that the cops, with the exception of one, are all white, and the people in the apartment complex are all black or Latino.
Well, you know, whatever.
Again, Romero is criticizing some things in the culture, especially the one cop who comes in and is shooting everybody, and he drops some racial epithets that I won't repeat. These four people come together. The two cops are Roger and Peter. They all get in the helicopter together and are flying through Pittsburgh looking down at some of the things that are happening. They come across what?
A helicopter?
No, they're already in the helicopter.
Is it like a fueling station or something?
No, after that. Where does most of the movie take place?
Oh, a mall. The mall. Any other time you'd be wanting me to say the gas station.
What is this movie really criticized? Dawn takes a shot at something very specific. It's talking about consumerism, and this movie is about the 70s consumerism culture. From the moment the four people enter the mall, they start to covet what they're finding. Peter and Roger are running around the mall killing zombies. Peter shouts, let's go shopping.
Yes, let's go shopping.
Steven keeps watching the TV even though the signal is gone, but he keeps flicking through the channels. After they've cleared the mall, the zombies, they're playing in the arcade, they're eating in the fancy restaurants, they're at the bank in the mall, and they're just running for the money. There's no point to look at the money, but they still want it. The ultimate representation of that theme is at the end when the motorcycle gang breaks into the mall and they start to steal stuff. Why are they stealing these things? These things have no value anymore.
Well, usually when there's a disaster of some sort, people people plunder and riot.
They're not plundering food. They're not plundering water.
When Hurricane Katrina happened, people were breaking into electronic stores and stealing TVs and radios.
The film is trying to point out that that's an illogical behavior.
Okay, Spock.
The zombies, they're us. The zombies are us. First get to the mall, and Franny asks Steven, why did they come back to the mall? And he says, well, this was an important place in their life. This is a cerebral film, and I think this film has a lot going on in its mind, but it is also the comic book zombie epic. Isn't it cool to shoot zombies?
Well, of course. It's cool to shoot zombies. God.
There is a lot of humor in this film. I think Dawn is genuinely a pretty funny movie. Zombies are getting the pies in the face at the end. There was a website I used to read called badmovies.org. It's still around, but it hasn't been updated in about a decade. Their entire synopsis for this film was, zombies taking over a mall isn't funny until you think about zombies on escalators.
That is funny.
Indeed, you do see the zombies on the escalator, and they seem baffled by it. They turn on the Muzak. God, the funniest scene in this movie, and maybe this is just a reflection on my sick sense of humor. The biker gang gets into the mall. One of the guys sits in the blood pressure machine. There was a time when the blood pressure machine was ubiquitous, but he sits in there, and as he's in the machine getting his blood pressure tested, the zombies descend on him, tear his arm off, and then the machine reads 0. Night is scarier, but I think this movie does have some decent jump scares when the police are trying to get the zombies out of the apartment, and you see the hands break through the wall and reach for them. That's a good jump scare.
Yeah.
More than the scares, the gore is...
Oh, the great Tom Savini gore.
Yeah, this was the first Tom Savini thing. We've introduced him to the world of horror. The first thing that happens when the cops break into that apartment complex is the fat racist cop kicks open a door and blows a dude's head off and explodes his head with a shotgun. That was a statement. And right after that, a woman sees her former lover, who's a zombie now, and he walks up to her, and she embraces him, and he immediately takes a big bite out of her arm. Bright red blood.
It's like hammer red, a little bit of an orange hue to it.
And I think that was intentional. George himself says this is the comic book zombie movie. But it is a little more colorful. It is a little unrealistic. Like the zombie that steps up into the helicopter blades, whoosh, gets the top of his head chopped. The look on his face is like, what the hell just happened?
It looks almost like Frankenstein.
Yeah,
there
he
for a
has
minute.
this huge brow.
Which I don't know if that was intentional.
Yeah, that was maybe just the special effects.
Tom Savini used condoms.
For the squibs, yeah.
That was a pretty ingenious way.
Do-it-yourself special effects. And then the very end, where the bikers get it. Full-on carnage, they're getting their guts torn out. Makes me a little queasy.
Yeah, that is pretty gnarly.
This is a low-budget movie. The makeup on the zombies is not super advanced. It's basically blue face paint.
I kind of prefer the simplistic...
Simplistic but effective.
Yeah.
In the first movie, the zombies really didn't have a lot of personality. In this one, the zombies have a little more personality. There's a nurse zombie. There's the Hare Krishna zombie. A nun. The fat guy in swim trunks.
I like them. I really like Ken Foray and his partner.
Yeah, they're zombie killing BFFs. The other, Flyboy and
I don't really
Fran.
care about the other two. I don't really care for those two. They more annoy me. I think the ones that steal the show are the zombies. They have personality. It's amazing to see how putting a different costume on a zombie can really affect the feel.
You remember the ending of this film, right? Peter and Fran get in the helicopter and fly off. That's the end of the movie. That was not the original written ending. There's a scene where Peter has the gun against his head. He's going to kill himself, and he decides not to. In the script, he kills himself, and in her depression, Fran throws herself into the helicopter blades and kills herself. Throughout the end credits, we would have watched the helicopter blade slowly spin down, the implication being they didn't have enough fuel to get away anyway. Now, that's not the ending they went with. The ending is still sort of hopeful. It's a false hope. Knowingly false hope.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
I prefer that over the really downbeat, everybody dies ending. Dawn of the Dead is usually the favorite of the original 3 films. It's probably my favorite.
I really like Day.
First came the night, then came the dawn. Now comes the most eagerly awaited day in horror film history. George A. Romero's Day of the Dead. For the few remaining, their only hope of survival is to find a cure, but the odds are against them.
We're in the minority now.
But their time is running out. The dead shall have their day.
And that brings us to 1985's Day. And one of the things I really like about these first 3 movies is they're each in a different decade. Mm-hmm. Each one comments on what's going on in that decade. By 1985, horror was really booming again. George originally had planned to make Day of the Dead the ultimate zombie movie. This was going to be a huge zombie epic. The distributor said, if you want the money required to make this film, you're going to have to make it an R. George was not going to compromise on the gore. So instead, he had to scale back his vision, completely rewrite the script, and this is the movie we got instead. Day of the Dead came out in 1985, which is the same year that Return of the Living Dead. Those films stole this one's thunder a little bit. Horror comedies, big special effects. This film's much more low-key. It's much darker in tone. For a long time, this was the least favorite. A lot of people look down on this one. And in time, it has developed a following on its own, and a lot of people, including Romero himself, say this is their favorite of the three now.
Pretty good.
By the time this movie takes place, the dead outnumber the living. We're fucked at this point. There's no hope of us getting our planet back. It follows a very small group of people, scientists and soldiers, who are living in an abandoned missile silo in Florida. And the scientists are studying the zombies, trying to figure out why this is happening. Meanwhile, the soldiers are just dickbags to everybody.
What's interesting about this is that, at least in my opinion, most of the characters are entertaining.
I think some of the characters are really unlikable. That's one of the reasons why this movie took a long road for people to get into it.
They're unlikable, but to the point that you watch it because you can't wait to see them bite it at the end.
Captain Rhodes and his henchmen, the fat one's named Steele, they're really so obnoxious to everybody. Captain Rhodes is like the biggest dickhead in cinema history. He is a willy...
Choke on him!
I'm running this monkey fort now, Frankenstein! Even before the zombies show up, a lot of guns are pulled. People are always threatening to shoot each other in this one. The characters are under a lot of stress.
Other than those three, the other characters I just find thoroughly entertaining.
Laurie Cardill was the actress who plays Sarah, who's our main character.
Yeah.
She's not your typical female leading character at all. She's very focused, she's very strong.
I really like her boyfriend. The Mexican dude, crazy.
Salazar is that character, and he is under a lot of stress.
I feel like he's the most real. That's how a real person would act.
In this entirely hopeless scenario. After he loses his arm, which is a great scene, this is the first time where they show if a person gets bitten by a zombie, if you immediately react and cut the damn limb off, after he loses his arm, he basically commits suicide by letting the zombies into the bunker.
Pretty much.
There's Dr. Logan, who they refer to as Frankenstein.
I feel like that's appropriate.
As the film goes on, you find out that Dr. Logan is rather unhinged. He's a very eccentric, entertaining character. Richard Liberty is that actor. I really like him. Bill, the radio operator, who likes his liquor, is always taking sips. He's a Caribbean guy.
There's the gay couple. At least that's what I got out of it.
What, you think the radio operator and John is the helicopter pilot?
Yeah. They live together, they drink together, they eat together.
John says to Sarah, if we can make it out of here and have a whole bunch of babies.
Yeah, but that's not a necessity. Maybe they're bi.
Never even thought about that before. What this film is really, target truly is the military-industrial, Reagan-era Cold War tension complex.
Well, there's that too.
The entire series, their main point is people can't talk. That's really evident in this one. The soldiers are belligerent, they're violent, they're sexist, they're racist. The scientists are the ones that are trying to do things right, but the military complex just doesn't want it to happen. My favorite parts of this movie delve to what makes the zombies tick. Dr. Logan, he's performing all these really strange experiments on the zombies. My favorite is the one that he cut down to just a brain. Zombie's still reacting. He cuts out a zombie's stomach, all its internal organs. It's still trying to bite him. In Night, they say, yeah, the satellite crashed, but that's not mentioned in any of the sequels. Mm-hmm. I don't know if Romero's ever confirmed this. He might have. But I've always gotten the impression the satellite from Venus was an explanation the distributors or the money people forced them to put in the script. There's not supposed to be a reason for why the dead are rising. We're not supposed to know.
Hoping that it would just be an undertone.
My absolute favorite character in Day of the Dead. I'm talking about Bub.
How could you not love Bub?
Bub's the best.
And this is the first time that you see him actually learning.
What's going on with Bub? Is Bub an anomaly, or are the zombies evolving?
We would find out later on that they're evolving.
When we first see him, Sarah's entering Logan's underground laboratory. Bub walks out of the shadows and startles her. You don't notice it the first time, but he actually says, I'm sorry. If you listen for it, you can hear him say that.
Oh, yeah.
Logan gives Bub these things. He gives him a toothbrush and a razor and a book, Salem's Lot, which is funny if you know that George Romero almost made Salem's Lot into a movie.
Oh my god, I would have wanted to see that movie.
My favorite thing of Bub is when he puts the headphones on him and he plays some Beethoven for him, and the look on Bub's face, his mind is visibly blown. He's never experienced something like this before.
They say that zombies only act on their primal urges.
Bub is different. He's the exception.
It would be like a baby hearing music for the first time.
Exactly. When Logan gets killed, when Bub finds the body,
he mourns.
Yeah, he throws his chain around, and then he seeks revenge even. He goes after Rhodes.
Which leads us to Choke on him! Choke on him! I hope that one day, if I'm getting devoured by zombies, I have balls enough to yell at the zombies as they're ripping off my legs to say, Choke on him!
It's a pretty badass last word. By the time this movie came out, there had been a lot of low-budget Italian rip-offs of Dawn of the Dead. There had been a lot of really gory, graphic zombie movies. Dad's back in town to show him how it's done.
And he does.
Oh, man. I cannot believe that this movie got a theatrical distribution, because it is so violent. The zombie who has his body cut open, and he sits up, and the guts splash out. When the zombies get into the bunker, hell really breaks loose. They grab him by the top of his jaw, and they're digging at his neck, and he's screaming the entire time. And as they pull his head off, his scream gets louder and louder, more high-pitched. One of the soldiers gets his face ripped off. Rhodes gets literally torn in two.
Yeah.
When Bill Bill and Sarah are escaping through the mine shaft. He hits a zombie in the head with a shovel, stabs the shovel into the head, bisects the head rolls off, and you can still see the eyes moving around.
Which is awesome.
Lots of cool stuff like that. And again, the zombies have a lot of personality in this. Zombie football player, a zombie clown, a ballerina, a soldier, a bride. And the very first zombie you actually see in the movie, they call him Dr. Tongue because he has no bottom jaw. Which really brings to mind, how does that zombie eat?
He rips off and then
shoves it down his mouth hole.
I would almost say that out of the original three, this is my favorite.
Out of the original three, the three that matter, let's face it, it's probably my least favorite, but they're all pretty damn good.
The world as we know it is no more. The land of the living has become the land of the dead.
It was my ingenuity that took an old world and made it into something new.
But if the living can adapt, so can the dead.
Zombies, man. They creep me out.
For a long time, Day of the Dead was the last George Romero zombie movie. He talked about wanting to make a new one, but he just couldn't get the money for it. At the turn of the millennia, there was suddenly this revival of interest in zombies, thanks to 28 Days Later, which is not a zombie movie, and especially the remake of Dawn of the Dead. For the first time in George's career, a big studio was willing to give him money to make his fourth Living Dead film, Land of the Dead. What do you think of this one?
Yeah, it's zombies, man. They freaked me out.
I don't think there would have been any way for Land of the Dead to live up to the hype. It had been over a decade. This was supposed to be the ultimate zombie movie. Was there any odds at all of this film living up to the movie you saw in your head?
No.
Unfortunately, no. When I first saw Land of the Dead in the theaters, I really, really wanted to like it. And I walked out of the theater saying, yeah, it was pretty good. But in the intervening years, and hey man, it's almost been a decade since this movie, by the way. This was 2005.
Okay, let's not talk about that.
In the intervening years, I've come to realize that I really don't like this movie that much. If this is meant to be the last zombie film, it really doesn't provide any satisfying conclusion.
None of that. To me, anyway, it doesn't feel like a Romero film.
No, it doesn't. Maybe that's just because it had been 20 years since he made a zombie movie. The characters in this one I find weak. Simon Baker, now known for The Mentalist, plays the hero in this. He's really boring.
Yeah.
It's not like this movie didn't have a good cast. John Leguizamo. If you want to make the case that there's always person of color in every one of George's films, I guess Cholo, John Leguizamo's character, fills that role.
Then as Aja Argento, who, by the way, we've met.
Man, she looks good in this.
Oh, God. And she's probably the most entertaining character in the film.
Yeah, Slack is her character's name, and she is really good.
Well, besides Dennis Hopper.
I love Dennis Hopper. When I say that he's one of my favorite actors, I mean that. But his performance is weird in this one. It's like he's in a different movie.
But that line will forever be immortalized.
Zombies, man, they freak me out. That was all over the trailers. But it's like he's going for comedy, and I don't know if that was the right thing for this one. But I also like Robert Joy, plays a character named Charlie, who is slow, but a crack shot. Most of the cast in this film leaves me cold.
Yeah.
You mentioned how Bub was the start of the evolution of the zombies. This movie is very heavily focused on that. Do you think it takes it too far?
Yes.
As do I.
Even though the zombies have their own costumes, it still manages to not give them personality like it did in the previous film.
Big Daddy is the leader of the zombie. If you want to use another franchise as a comparison, he's the zombie Caesar. He's kind of annoying. He yells a lot. He's ordering the other zombies around. He's planning strategy. He's actually shooting guns and setting off.
He can't talk.
He improvises a bomb. I don't know, man.
Too smart.
He's too smart. I agree. The only thing I really like about that is that the zombies figure out that they can walk through water. You want to talk about the sociological context of this film. You look at the zombies. What are they? Big Daddy's a gas station attendant. One of them's a butcher. And the zombies are all outside. And the humans are living in Fiddler's Green. So the zombies are the put upon lower class. And humanity are the rich upper class. And the zombies are getting back at them about the class struggle. The zombies are the lower class and they're eating the rich, quite literally. The gore in this film. What about that CGI? That CGI blood. There is a lot of CGI blood.
I hate CGI blood. I just want to go on record. Zach knows this to be true. Every time I see CGI blood in a movie, I go, ugh.
And it's bad in this one. The disappointing part about that, the not CGI gore, is pretty damn good. My favorite is zombies are feasting. One grabs a hold of an arm, and they split the arm down the middle like a wishbone. A zombie grabs somebody and tears their belly button piercing out. I don't really want to spend a lot of time on the latter-day Romero trilogy, but like how you can split the Star Wars series into original trilogy and prequel trilogy, you can split the Romero Dead films into classic variety and modern variety. And Land was a disappointment at the time. It's still subpar. Maybe if he had made it back in the 90s when he wanted to, it would have been better.
News agencies are reporting accounts of the dead returning to life.
This turns out to be a big thing. I just want to record it.
The problem doesn't seem to be that people are waking up dead. The dead people are waking up.
Saying they're all dead. Yes. This is a hospital. There's nobody here. I can't do this anymore. Every time we walk in somewhere, somebody dies.
You haven't seen Diary or Survival.
No.
I won't talk about these very much. Diary was the found footage George Romero zombie movie. When this film came out, I remember really liking it. I will be totally honest, I have not seen Diary or Survival since they were first released. This is how long ago this was. It was really an indictment of the MySpace generation, now Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, whatever the kids are using these days, about this me generation mentality. There is some cool gore stuff. A zombie gets 2 defibrillator paddles to the head and the eyes blow up. This deaf Amish guy, a zombie's attacking him from behind and he picks up a sickle and slams it through his head into the zombie behind him. I really need to revisit Diary because it was incredibly didactic. The person who's narrating the film saying, are we any better than they are? They being the zombies. I remember that being a problem. Survival I remember even less about. Survival's not found footage, but it's sort of a sequel to Diary. At one point in Diary, the teens, who are the main characters, find this group of soldiers. Survival's about those guys. They come upon an island where these people are trying to live with the zombies. The zombies are on chains. There's a zombie mailman who they've taught to deliver the mail, trying to domesticate them. There's also some sort of family feud in this film. The final image of the film, and I don't want to spoil it too much because I know you haven't seen it, is 2 zombies standing apart from each other, trying to shoot empty pistols at each other. The duel still going on in death. Survival does some cool shit. I've always wondered what would happen if a person bit a zombie, and this movie answers that question.
They turn into a zombie.
Does that confirm that it's in the blood? The blood is how the pathogen is passed on? Neither of these films are well liked. People really hate these movies. I remember being a little more forgiving of both of them, but I haven't seen them in a while, so it's hard to say. And also, they eat a horse.
They came to pay their respects.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Now they're running for their lives. Every shelter is becoming a trap, and every road out,
Don't stop no matter what happens,
is just another dead end. George Romero's Night of the Living Dead.
You mentioned the remake of Night of the Living Dead, and it's notable that all of the original Romero trilogy have been remade at some point. The remake of Night of the Living Dead came out in 1990. I mentioned earlier, the original Night of the Living Dead is in the public domain. They made the remake to try and retrieve at least part of the rights. You like the remake a little better than the original?
I do. I like Badass Barbara.
Played by Bridget Tallman.
Whom we've met.
And who plays Ben?
Tony Todd.
Whom I've met. One of the weird things about Tony Todd being in this movie is when Ben first walks on screen, there's this angle. It's of his legs, and he's carrying a crowbar. And you see the hook of the crowbar fall down where his arm would be. When I first watched this, I thought, oh, that's a reference to him playing Candyman. This movie actually came out before Candyman. When I asked Tony Todd about that when I met him a few years ago at a con, he's described that as just one of those cosmic things.
He seems like a guy that would be into the cosmic things.
Yeah, a little bit. What would you say are some of the major differences between this film and the original, of which it is a fairly close remake of?
Right. The differences would be Badass Barbara.
Yeah.
She actually plays a part in the film. She doesn't sleep on the couch for 90% of the movie.
Remember a lot of Bridget Tallman in a dirty wife beater with a shotgun.
She even points out they're so slow, you could just walk right past them.
Got Tony Todd in it, who would go on to become, I guess you'd call him a horror icon. And then Bill Moseley plays Johnny. It's cool to see him in this.
That was Bill Moseley.
Yeah, that was him.
Who we've met.
Yes, we have. Wow, there are 3 people in this movie we've met. What are the odds? 4 if you want to say I met Tom Savini.
Well, yeah, we passed him.
He said hi to us.
It counts.
Big difference between the original and this one. And for the record, I like this movie. I think this is probably the best remake of Night we could have asked for. In the original, Ben was more reasonable than Cooper was. And in this film, they're on the same level of not really being reasonable.
And I like that.
I guess it's more realistic that both of them are panicked.
Right. It's a more natural reaction.
I think the film takes it a little too far. I think Ben's a bit too much of an asshole.
Well, maybe. The thing I like better about this one is the lack of use of tools.
The zombies are dumber in this one.
Not that it was a bad thing in the original. It offers up more jump scares. The little girl, instead of you seeing her eating the father and then chasing after the mom, grabbing whatever you want to call that thing.
The trowel.
The trowel.
That's what it's called.
The digging triangle.
The digging triangle?
That's what it is!
Ben also, I've seen this one. She doesn't use that to kill her mom.
No, she's laying there asleep and her mom happens to look away. The daughter pops up and bites her right on the neck.
Okay. See, I prefer the trowel. George was actually involved in this one. He produced it. He helped write it. Maybe he was trying to correct what he saw as missteps in the previous film.
And you can see where it improves upon some things.
Badass Barbara especially. I think he felt bad about the original Barbara being so ineffective. If you want to look at it from a sociological context, this was post 9 to 5, women in the workplace. She's like the voice of reason that is soundly ignored by the 2 alpha males.
Right.
Now let's talk about the zombie makeup. Zombies look great in this.
Oh, they're awesome.
They all have a yellow jaundice color to their skin. The first zombie we see in this one one, he approaches and then we see him from behind, and I guess it's sort of funny, but he's only wearing half a tux. Fresh out of the funeral home, his ass is hanging out. One zombie that has a really heavy brow, the old woman with the doll that was on all the posters. But my favorite zombie, it's a junkie that still has the needle in his arm. He just died. The ending on this one is different. Ben gets zombified. Cooper makes it through the night instead, and what does Barbara do when she sees Cooper?
Shoots him.
Shoots him in the head and says, another one for the fire. There are those call-outs to the film. Chili Billy's in this one too. They use the line, yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up. Savini directed this film. A bummer that his directorial career never really took off. This is a good-looking film.
As far as actual just remakes go, this is probably one of the best remakes of any movie that I've seen.
Officials have declared a state of emergency.
Everybody they kill gets up and kills.
Residents are advised to find a safe place and stay there.
I've just been informed that we are going off the air and switching to the emergency broadcasting system.
Look up the road, there's a lot more of them. Why are they coming here?
Maybe they're coming for us.
What do you think of the next George Romero remake?
No.
And in the early 2000s, there was this boom of interest in the genre. And out of that came...
The Running Zombie.
The Dawn of the Dead remake from 2003. I remember being there and thinking, oh man, zombies are cool again. This is cool. Since then, ironically, the zombie has become the horror fad that would not die. Everybody except for the Walking Dead devotees are real sick of it. And
exactly.
We talked about this a little bit in our commentary for The Thing. It seems to me that zombie movies have really lost sight of the point. In the original Dawn of the Dead, we, the viewer, are not Roger and Peter. We're not the badass zombie killers. We, the viewer, are the zombies. There's this survivalist element to it that I find really annoying and distasteful.
Yeah, you're a tool. No.
Remaking Dawn of the Dead, terrible idea, right?
Right.
Somewhat smartly. It's a pretty loose remake, though. Keeps the zombies, it keeps
them all.
A few choice lines, and pretty much nothing else. You know who wrote this movie?
No.
James Gunn.
You mean Guardians of the Galaxy, James Gunn?
Exact same guy. How does that make you feel, JD?
I feel like I need to watch Guardians of the Galaxy a third time to make sure it's a good movie.
James Gunn, yeah, now he's this big blockbuster filmmaker because of Guardians being such a huge hit. And before that, he made Slither and Super, both films I liked a lot. He got to start in Troma, but he got to start in mainstream studios by writing Scooby-Doo and this movie.
Scooby-Doo, but not bad.
For the record, I don't think the Dawn of the Dead remake is bad. I don't hate this movie.
However, I don't hate it. It's just lackluster.
There is some stupid shit in this movie. Primarily the fucking running zombies. Why? Why do they run? They're dead! We don't like the running zombies in this. And I don't think it's so much the fact that they're running, but the way they act. They have these amber eyes, and they yell a lot. They make a lot of weird... They don't act
There's a difference between running zombie and rabid zombie.
They're like people with the rage virus. They're not like zombies.
Right.
As stupid as the running zombies are, you know what's even stupider? The fucking zombie baby.
Oh, God.
What would happen to a pregnant woman if she was bitten by a zombie? What would happen to the fetus? That's a question worth asking. This film handles it in the worst way possible. Her giving birth to a little zombie baby with the amber eyes. I'm shaking my head, listeners.
We as horror fans know what happens when someone is born a vampire. We have had numerous movies to tell us.
Yeah, you get Blade.
We know what happens there. I wouldn't mind seeing a movie that did it right.
There was a film that did it right. It was called Grace with Jordan Ladd. This film is just the Dawn of the Dead remake. Pretty decent action film, but it's soulless. It doesn't have any of the social commentary that the original had.
And then that god-awful Down with the Sickness.
The Richard Cheese version?
Yeah.
That's one of the things I like about this movie. Who directed this film? Zack Snyder.
Well, that explains a lot.
Man of Steel director and Owl enthusiast Zack Snyder. It doesn't have his Snyderisms as much. There is the slow motion, but not a lot of it. It does have that color palette where it's very washed out and grimy, but still somehow very slick and commercial. But something this film does have that none of Zack Snyder's other movies have. This film has humor in it. I like the Down with the Sickness montage.
I don't. I like the montage, I just hate the song.
They're shooting the celebrity lookalikes.
I like that. Leno.
Jay Leno.
Burt Reynolds.
Andy, the guy across the street in the gun shop, is one of the best characters in this film.
And he does a dog.
He's completely voiceless until the very end when he gets bitten. The cast in this is pretty solid. Vig Rhames, Sarah Polley, these are good actors.
The zombie stuff in the mall is great. When they're going in, they haven't quite found any zombies yet. They go into the one store and a zombie leaps out at them.
Yeah, there's like a zombie janitor in the bathroom.
Right from the time that the doors break open.
You don't like the Doom bus.
I don't like the Doom bus. I don't like the horde of running zombies.
There's too many characters in the film. And what do you think of the ending? This film has a downbeat ending. When Romero did it, it worked, but when this movie does it, it just comes off as nihilistic and unnecessary.
Yeah.
Probably the best remake of Dawn we could have asked for. This will probably give it a 3 stars out of 4. 4?
3 out of 4?
You wouldn't give it 3?
3 out of 5, maybe.
Did you ever see the Day of the Dead remake from 2008?
Years ago.
Oh, so you remember how fucking terrible this movie is.
Isn't this the one with the vomiting zombies?
That was the DVD cover, and that was one of the most baffling DVD covers I've ever seen. That's how you get people to buy your movie. And the cover of this one was a zombie and a giant plume of vomit coming out of its mouth. Yeah, that's attractive. I'm gonna buy that. I remember Nick Cannon in this swinging around a broom like a samurai sword. I remember zombies crawling on walls. Instead of Bub, there's a vegetarian zombie named Bud. In my old review, I referred to Day of the Dead as the nadir of the horror remake trend. I've not revisited it to reevaluate that opinion, and I don't think I'm going to.
They only come out at night. They're mean, rude, and dead. The dead are refusing to remain buried.
What are we gonna do? The graveyard out there's full of people coming out of the ground.
We have a little problem. Rabbit weasels.
What?
More brains.
Do you want pie? It's party time! Do you want pie?
They're back from the grave and ready to party.
Aside from the 6 Romero films and their respective remakes, now things, as far as continuity goes, are going to get complicated. The one person who maintained some rights from the original movie was the producer. In the mid-80s, he wrote a book called Return of the Living Dead, and he wrote the book with the intention of getting it turned into a movie. It was originally going to be directed by Tobe Hooper of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Poltergeist fame, but instead, Dan O'Bannon, writer of Alien, took the script and completely rewrote it. It was originally a serious horror film, and he completely rewrote it and injected what I think is Dan O'Bannon's trademarks, which is an inventiveness and this very quirky sense of humor.
Yeah.
How does this film tie into the original Night of the Living Dead?
Does it?
It does. At the beginning of the movie, when find the zombie gas, he says, remember that movie, Night of the Living Dead? Well, this is the true story that inspired that movie.
Oh, yeah.
The film opens with a title card that says, this film is based on a true story. I really, really, really like Return of the Living Dead. When you look up great 80s horror movies, I think this is one of the examples you would see.
This is definitely one of the hierarchy of 80s horror movies.
It's one of the best zombie films ever made.
Definitely.
The zombies run in Dawn of the Dead, and we hate those zombies. But the zombies run in Return of the Living Dead, and we love these zombies.
They're different.
This film says we're not doing the Romero thing, we're doing our own thing. The zombies are created by a gas, the trioxin gas. It has a very different effect on them than your traditional zombie virus. They can run, they can talk, and they don't eat flesh. What do they eat?
Brains.
It surprises me that this is the movie that invented the zombies eating brains thing. They get a zombie to explain why they eat brains. It helps ease the pain of being dead. Science backs me up on this. The brain contains dopamine, which is the pleasure hormone. So it makes complete sense.
Okay.
This movie came in the golden age of 80s special effects.
Oh, yeah.
And the zombies in this look fucking awesome. As much personality as the zombies in the original series have, I think these have more personality. There's the Yellow Man, which is the first zombie we see. The first thing they do, they hold him down, they drive a pickaxe for his brain. They say that's what worked in the movie, but it doesn't work in this one. These zombies are pretty much indestructible.
Yeah, the only way you can kill them is by burning them.
And even then, the gas gets out of their body and goes up into the atmosphere and makes more zombies. They pin the Yellow Man down, cut his head off, and then this headless body is running around, which is funny. One of the people try to get out, film is set in a mortuary, trying to escape, and he sees a zombie eating somebody. The zombie gets up and runs after him, but the zombie has no legs, limping around on his kneecaps. Who's the undead MVP of this film?
Leanna Quigley.
Okay, well, yeah, her too.
Or are you talking about Tarman?
Yeah, it's hard to pick. Who's my favorite zombie, Bub or Tarman? I don't know if I can choose. That's the Sophie choice of zombie movie fans.
Well, you see, you don't have to choose, because they're different continuities.
What is it that makes the Tarman so...
The gore.
That he's drippy. That's a really unique concept for a zombie. We hadn't seen anything like that before.
Right, he's gross, but in an awesome way.
You mentioned the zombies talk, though they don't usually say a lot.
He's got just enough flesh to move the bones.
It's really impressive that he looks so much like a skeleton. There's a person in that suit. He doesn't do a lot, but he has so much personality with the way he says, more brains! It's really funny. This movie came right after the first wave of the American slasher film, after we were all familiar with the slasher formula by this point. Something Dan O'Bannon intentionally did is he wanted to distinguish the characters in this film from your usual slasher movie, spam in a van, bait. He made them punks.
Oh, yeah.
This is a punk rock movie through and through, from the music to the way the characters look. The leader of this punk group, he calls himself Suicide. He's got a chain from his nose.
Leanna Quigley with the short spiky hair.
Yeah, she's got the Ziggy Stardust mullet. Suicide, Scuzz, Spider, and Trash. They are hardcore punks. There are these two characters, Chuck and Casey, who are new wave kids. And then there's, I guess you'd call her the final girl, Tina, who is squeaky clean. What the fuck? Why is this pretty suburban blonde hanging out with these guys? Maybe the movie did that on purpose. I don't know. You mentioned Leanna Quigley. You talked a little bit about Leanna Quigley in our Scream Queens episode. Is it fair to say that she spends the majority of her screen time in the nude?
Yeah.
That's the stuff of 80s horror legend. Man, you've got to see this movie. movie got these crazy zombies in it, and this chick takes her clothes off and she never puts them back on. Good for her. She's a game performer. But is she a good actress?
Who cares?
Either she's intentionally playing the character very deadpan, either she's a bad actress, or she's totally stoned out of her mind. Either way, she's hilarious.
I'm going with stoned out of her mind.
Yeah, probably. Mark Venturini plays Suicide, and he has this hilarious monologue. Trash really wants in his pants. She's like slithering up against him, and he's going on about how, you think this is a fucking costume? This is who I am. This is real. Miguel Nunez plays the first black guy to make it to the end.
That's racist.
We mentioned the humor in this film.
I think it's necessary, though. And I think that's why the running zombie works.
Yeah, I think you're right. By making it funny, it makes it okay for the zombies to run and talk and do things that would be laughed off the screen as ridiculous in a serious film.
Exactly.
James Karen, Clu Gallagher, and Tom Matthews. Don Caffa as Ernie. Freddie and James Karen's character, they get hit with the gas and they slowly zombify over the course of the film, which is both funny and horrifying. Right now, all I want to do is drink this fucking coffee! Clu Gallagher, who's very much the straight man, when they cut up the yellow man, they put him in the garbage bag and they take him across the street to Ernie. What do they tell him is in the bag? Rabbit weasels. Rabbit weasels? What are you doing with a bag full of rabbit weasels? And a joke you don't get unless you've seen the movie a bunch of times is Ernie is a Nazi. When they first meet him, he's got headphones on, he's listening to Wagner, and he's got a Luger in his holster. If you look real close, on a little pinboard in the background, he's got a picture of Hitler. Ernie is a Nazi.
Oh, yeah.
And he's hilarious, though, because he's always very matter-of-fact. Before we wrap up Return of the Living Dead, which is a movie we both love, great 80s horror film. Overall, this film resists the social commentary element that George Romero had. But there's something I think I picked up on. This movie reinvents the zombie for the 80s, otherwise known as the cocaine decade.
Oh, God, they're coke zombies.
Zombies eat brains to dull the pain of death, like cokeheads snort to dull the pain of life. And when they've had their hit, they're up and hopping around. And what's the government's response to the drug problem? Nuke it from orbit. Am I crazy, or is that in the movie?
That's in the movie.
A deadly experiment, a freak accident, a secret that will be carried to the grave as the horror classic. It reborn. Jesse will be the first to know. Billy will be the first to go. 7 of the living against an army of the dead, starved for life. Return of the Living Dead 2. Just when you thought it was safe to be dead.
They made a sequel in 1988 called Return of the Living Dead 2. I first saw this movie years and years ago, and I remember not caring for it. And that's sort of the general consensus. It's not well regarded.
Those people can suck it, because I like the movie.
I rewatched it a couple days ago. Yeah, it's still bad. This one really functions on the more of the same principle. This one is almost the exact same plot as the original.
That is a big problem for the movie. I will give you that.
It starts the same way. Some trioxin gas gets misplaced. Some people find it. They open it up, and then the gas gets over a cemetery, and zombies come out. And then it even brings back Tom Matthews and James Karen. They're playing different characters.
That's why I get fucking confused.
The exact same thing happens to them. They get sprayed with the gas and they slowly turn into zombies.
The tar man comes back too.
Yeah, the tar man comes back, and what do? They shove him in a river. That's his only scene in the movie. That's saying fuck you to the fans of the first one. Let's talk about the humor in this film. The humor is really goofy and broad. There's a zombie who's trying to get out of his grave and other zombies keep stomping on him. Oh, he can't get out. The decapitated head gets a screwdriver in the head, and what does it do?
Get this dang screwdriver out of my head.
At the end of the movie, the talking head comes back.
Oh, I love that. As far as a zombie movie could go, that's adorable.
By the time the end of this movie comes and a zombie in the thriller jacket shows up, I was screaming at my laptop, "Turn it off! Turn it off!"
The only way they could have made that scene better is when they got electrocuted, the zombies started.
Yeah, no. The zombies in this have a weakness to electricity, which pusses out. The point of the Return of the Living Dead is that they're totally indestructible. And another weird thing about this film is that they tried to make a zombie movie that was kid-friendly.
Maybe it was like corporate meddling. It does have really strong parts to it, which is why I go to bat for this film.
Okay, what are the really strong parts?
I like the relationship between the town doctor and the little boy. Some of the jokes are over the top, yeah, but then there are some that are really neat when the zombie is answering over the CB radio.
When they ask him who's president?
Yes.
Harry Truman?
Yes.
That was probably the funniest joke in the movie. I'll agree with you on that one.
I feel like if you were going to try and lure a bunch of zombies.
When they're throwing the cow brains. But the zombies don't eat animals, though. That doesn't make any sense.
But these are different movies than Romero films.
I don't know.
With the whole electricity thing, I would like to point out that maybe it's starting to heart, which would be like anti-zombie.
There's a lot less gore in this one.
There's
one head chewing. Quality of the special effects are decline in general. I gotta say, you're alone on this one. I'm not a fan of part 2.
Whatever. Let's talk about 3.
They vowed to stay together forever, that their love would never die. But their pledge remained untested until they went looking for a thrill and stumbled on the chilling fact that even the dead can go on living. And tonight, fate will put their promises to the test. Now that she's dead,
He's frightened to live without her. Love never dies.
Was the world really asking for a new Return of the Living Dead movie in 1993? That seems past its expiration date, doesn't it? But for whatever reason, The Living Dead returned a third time. This one was directed by Brian Yunza, who is an eccentric but inconsistent talent. He's made some really interesting movies like Society, and he's made some terrible movies like Faust, Love of the Damned. Part 3 really completely does away with the comedy.
Yeah, it's pretty strictly horror.
It's a very early example of the supernatural romance.
Yes.
Who would have thought that the first sexy zombie movie was not Warm Bodies, but Return of the Living Dead Part 3?
Yeah.
They star-crossed teen lovers. The boy is named Kurt. Julie is his girlfriend. Kurt's dad is in the military, and the military is still trying to weaponize the trioxin gas. They witness a zombie being brought to life with the trioxin gas. Later that night, Kurt is running away with Julie. He's on his motorcycle. There's a wreck. Julie dies. He takes her back to the lab, gasses her, accidentally unleashes a couple zombies in the process, and she's slowly becoming more and more undead as the film goes on.
But unlike the first two films, it really makes the slow turn into a zombie work.
In the first two movies, it's played for humor, and in this one, it's played for pathos.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just legitimately creepy. She goes from being kind of normal, getting progressively violent as the film goes on.
For me, it's not so much scary as it's just tragic and sad. She's losing her humanity.
And she keeps talking about the hunger, the insatiable hunger, and how the pain makes the hunger go.
And that's a new thing this movie brings to the series. Not only can eating brains dull the pain of being dead, self-mutilation can make the hunger go away.
It separates itself from the series.
And it's got the trioxin gas, and that's the only link.
They're not running zombies.
There's not a lot of running. They're still indestructible. They can still only be killed by burning.
Yeah.
It is a loose sequel. The chemistry between the actors Mindy Clark and J. Trevor Edmond is solid. Their performances are good, and that elevates the material that maybe could have been trite, typical troubled teen plot, but the performances make it work. The reason, maybe, I might be onto something here, why this movie was so popular on video, why it was rented so much, is because on the cover of the VHS box,
they have a picture
of Mindy Clark,
super zombied out,
partially nude. Nowadays, the body modification scene is almost mainstream. That was still fringe at this point. At one point, she's left on her own devices, and she really goes nuts with the mutilation. She has a lip ring and a nipple ring, and she's got nails for her arms and glass for her breast. But the weird part, she's still sexy.
That's Mindy Clark. I'd have sex with her even knowing that I would get eaten afterwards.
That says a lot about both of us.
If she has that big-ass rock tape.
Yeah, she ties a rock.
She goes total super zombie.
And it's cool.
Seeing it on paper, you would not think that that would work.
It's a third sequel in a franchise, and it brings something new to the table.
I view it as good as the first one.
No, it's not as good as the first one, but it's definitely the best sequel. The effects in general in this one are much better. The Tarman's not in this one, but there is a substitute, the zombie that's melted. His head and his arm are fused.
Yeah.
And then he pulls the skin off of his face, half a skull.
There's the elongated man.
The really skinny zombie at the beginning, you mean?
No. The Mexican zombie.
Oh, yeah, the Mexican guy who gets his head torn off. He's alive and his head's bobbing around on the spine. Part of the military plot is they want to weaponize the zombies by putting metallic exoskeletons on them. Shouldn't have worked, but somehow the movie pulls it off.
Right.
The film has this tragic ending. The human boyfriend and his zombie girlfriend, they die together. They both walk into the furnace
yeah, but he
together.
Gets bitten. It justifies
That's true.
it.
He did get bit. The film is a romantic horror tragedy. It's not a perfect movie. We were talking a lot about race, but I feel like some of the ethnic characters in this film are a little derivative. The Mexican gang, and Riverman, the homeless black guy.
Okay, the homeless black guy, that is racist. I don't feel like the Hispanic thing was intentional.
A lot of people love Return of the Living Dead 3. Some people like it more than the original. I'd say it's not as good as the original. It's good, though. It is a solid sequel. We're not going to talk about Return of the Living Dead 4, Necropolis, and Return of the Living Dead 5, Rave to the Grave, because those movies don't count. Before we close out, I want to talk about another bizarre spin-off of the original Romero films. Dawn of the Dead was released in Italy as Zombi, where it was a huge hit. In order to ride that success, a different company made an unofficial sequel called Zombie 2. In America, this movie was released as Zombie. And as a kid, it was always very confusing to me, because there was a Zombie and a Zombie 3, but no Zombie 2. In a pre-IMDb age, I didn't know that Zombie and Zombie 2 were the same movie. Anyway, you literally just saw this film for the first time today. What do you think of Lucio Fulci's Zombie?
It's interesting. interesting.
It's an Italian splatter film.
I definitely like Italian splatter horror better than I like Italian art horror.
Fulci, some people put him in the same category as Argento or Bava. I wouldn't. The Beyond's a great movie, which we'll talk about someday. Though he is a decent director, there is some good atmosphere in this film. The score, that main theme, is very ominous and used very well. And there is some cool shots when the zombies are surfacing, dirt's falling off the lens. That stuff's cool.
You know, Rotface.
The poster zombie, very small role in the film.
He shouldn't have crossed those guys.
That image of the zombies with the worms in their face. And as we were watching the film, we were talking about how the makeup in this is unique.
Yes, it is very unique.
It's some of the grossest zombies ever put to screen because they're still crunchy.
They almost look like they have barnacles growing on them.
Yeah, they're very dirty.
And zombie versus shark.
The zombie versus shark scene is very famous. And before that, the girl goes scuba diving in her thong underwear with nothing else on. Okay, this is an exploitation film. The zombie versus shark scene is very famous. And then the splinter in the eye is, that one makes you squirm a bit. The gore on this, it's disgusting. Heads are bashed open. Throats are torn out. Full-on splatter. It's a bit slow in parts.
But it's not like Raimi splatter.
It's not splat stick. It's not fun splatter. It's gross splatter.
Yeah.
But if that's what you're in the market for, I think this one hits the spot. All the female characters in the film just stand and scream while the zombies kill them because Lucio Fulci had some serious issues with women. The ending of this movie is legitimately eerie when the zombies are marching on New York.
Yes.
You can make the case that this film might take place in the same universe as the Romero movies. If you fudge the timeline a bit, it's another perspective on the start of the zombie apocalypse.
Maybe.
Zombie 2 was an unofficial sequel to Dawn of the Dead, and there have been a number of unofficial sequels to Zombie 2, Zombie 3, Zombie 4, all these movies. We don't talk about them. Because Night of the Living Dead's in the public domain, there have been all these weird remakes of the film. I know one was in 3D and had Sid Haig in it.
Which isn't very good.
Yeah,
it sucks.
They're coming to get you, Barbara, and text speak. That's all I remember about that one. And I know there was one with Andrew Devioff. There was an animated remake of the movie. There's been all these weird spin-offs. This episode could have been even longer. We covered the important shit.
Covered the definitive zombie movie.
These are the essentials.
If you've seen these, you've seen every zombie movie that you need to see to understand.
I mean, there's other stuff like
to
Dead
understand
Alive.
the genre.
Okay, sure, to understand the genre.
If you would have let me finish.
Send more paramedics.
If you have any zombie-related thoughts, if you want to send us your delicious, delicious brains, email us at bangersinmash88@yahoo.com. The word bangers, the letter N, the word mash, the number 88@yahoo.com. Facebook group, www.facebook.com/thebangersinmashow. Been a lot of activity on there. Thanks, Lloyd, for your kind words. Over at my blog, zaxfilmthoughts.blogspot.com. My 6 weeks of Halloween celebration have started. If you enjoy listening to the show, I recommend you seek out the blog and read what I've written. Thank you, Wit Brain, for all the wonderful feedback you've left on my blog. I really appreciate that. Follow me on Twitter, @LastMonsterKid, if you want to hear me rambling about random bullshit in the middle of the night.
Follow me on Twitter if you want to, at MKFan88. I'm very rarely on there, but, you know. Wait, do you hear that? Oh God! There's more!
Brains!